imagine a world where Mexican could show up on your DNA test results. I know where you're going with. Actually, let's just say it together for old time's sake. Mexican isn't an ethnicity, it's a nationality. So it's heresy to even say these words out loud, that you would take a DNA test and it would show up whatever percentage Mexican. I totally accept that. I grasp that. But let's be open-minded for the sake of this video, because peace across the world is all based on this video and the message I'm speaking. That's how grandiose this whole thing is. So just imagine, okay, you all know my situation. In theory, I would take the DNA test and it would perfectly show 25% Mexican, because my grandma was a Mexican American, a first generation. Both of her parents moved here from Michoacan, Mexico, and everybody in her family before that. You know the history of Mexico. But ultimately, in theory, I would take it and it would say 25% Mexican. No, in defense of this being a possibility, let's just imagine this. So many people are intelligent enough to recognize and to realize that when you take a DNA test, it's not as compartmentalized as we want it to be. It's not as clear cut as we want it to be. That, oh, like even for me, I'm like nearly a third Spanish, Iberian is what it's showing up as. Well, as we already know in what I just said, Iberian could be Spanish or Portuguese. So to say that I'm roughly a third of that, well, the DNA doesn't distinguish between Portuguese or Spanish, because DNA does as much as they want to. They can't be anything more than just a genetic marker for a geographic location based on today's borders. So borders have changed a lot over the centuries. So if we're talking about something as ancient as DNA, human DNA, then how could we say that you're whatever percent English or whatever percent Scottish or whatever percent French? Can we really say that? I mean, we already know that, especially with my heritage, you could show up French, but it could just as easily be German or Dutch. That's how closely related certain groups are. So with that being said, I don't see why it would be a problem to have Mexican show up on a DNA test, because ultimately what that implies is that predictable mix of Native American and largely Spanish DNA, that it's so predictable that it could just be its own genetic marker in modern day. And what gave me this idea, my wife and I were watching a clip of Saturday Night Live, and they were talking about like how politically incorrect it is that if you're an actor, that you have to actually be that nationality to play that actor. Like when I've talked about this on this channel before, you know, how easily in Hollywood Jewish actors play Italians and vice versa and that sort of thing. So they were talking about this, and this one guy said, well, the actor was 5% Mexican. Now that was just part of the script, it was just part of the skit. But ultimately, like, I don't see that being a problem. I totally get it that my DNA test says that I'm roughly a third Spanish and roughly almost, what, a quarter Native American. I show high markers on that Mexican heritage I've got from my grandmother. But ultimately, I just don't think it's a stretch. I don't see why it would be such a bad thing to say that the DNA tests actually say that you're whatever percent Mexican, because how is that any different from what it's already doing when we're looking at especially Europe, that we're going to distinguish that, oh yeah, you're 12% Scottish and you're 10% French. The fact that it's going to do that, I think we're taking certain liberties that, for us not to be hypocrites, we have to admit, right, that Mexican could be just as legitimate of a genetic marker. What are your thoughts? Do you believe I'm ignorant? Do you believe I'm wrong? Do you believe I'm immoral? Or am I onto something? Comments.